So over on the NA version of the game, we have the Valentine's event in full swing, and one of the things that I love about the Valentine's event is that they bring back a ton of servants that I usually would not get the opportunity to talk about, because usually we're talking about limited servants or new events coming to the game and all of this other stuff that usually puts a lot of these other non-limited servants or the more story locked servants kind of pushed to the side for the new bright and shiny units. But thankfully, Valentine's just kind of sits there and they're like, all right, here's like 80 different guys going on raid up, and it gives me the opportunity to finally talk about them and give videos to servants that I definitely think deserve them, or just servants that I want to talk about. And one of those servants is Tamamo, one of the servants that I think just kind of got the biggest short end of the stick in FGO and is probably one of the most underrated servants in the game. It's like Castoria came out and everybody forgot how good Tamamo actually was. Or I guess I should say still is, because Tamamo has not really fallen off at all. She's still as good as she was, and in fact still has a place in the arts meta in, like, say a Tamamo, your DPS plus a Castoria setup, and I'm going to explain all of that and more in today's video, giving Tamamo a proper video here on the channel. Before we actually begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for daily FGO content. Also, make sure you peep those links down in the description down below. Primarily, make sure you check out that Twitch link because I stream every weekday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so make sure you come out there and hang out with your boy. But with all that being said, let's start talking about Tamamo, starting off with her hits. And I really don't think I need to focus too much on her hits, actually, because the only thing that's really important in the context of using Tamamo is that she has a triple arts deck. You know, because the only thing you want to be doing when you put Tamamo in your team comp is you want to be firing her NP literally as often as possible, right? So anytime she has an arts card pop up, you try to slap that in one of your arts chains, which realistically shouldn't be too hard, because at minimum you should have like 8 arts cards in rotation, 3 from Tamamo, 3 from Castoria, and at least 2 from your main DPS. But you could have much more depending on, say, if there's NP cards floating around, if your DPS has an extra arts card because they also have a triple arts deck. And so really, don't even like kind of focus on the hits here and anything. Just make sure every time you see one of her arts cards, you're slapping that in an arts chain, because you always want her to be accruing more NP so you can start spamming her own NP. So enough about that, enough about the hits. Let's kind of start getting into the good stuff, starting off with her skills. Now, skill 1, I think this is grossly overlooked how good this still actually is, especially in the context for current art setups. Because what it's doing is it's reducing one enemy's charge by 1 and then giving the entire party except herself, but she has a non-damaging NP, so who cares, a 30% NP damage buff for 3 turns on a low 5-turn cooldown. And the reason this is really good is that both of these things provide something that Castoria does not. Firstly, and probably the most immediately noticeable, is going to be the NP damage buff, because that's going to give your art setups access to all 4 damage types. Because if you didn't know, different damage types in FGO are multiplicative and are split into your card buffs, your attack buffs, your NP damage buffs, and your special damage mods. Castoria gives you a attack buff and a special damage mod. Both Tamamo and Castoria both give you an arts card buff, and then Tamamo herself gives you the NP damage buff as well. So it gives you access to all 4 of those. But also there's her ability to reduce an enemy's NP gauge by 1, which is really important because that's something that Castoria doesn't provide in her ability to keep the party safe. Castoria provides a targetable invincibility and a party-wide solemn defense, which is really good at keeping the party safe, but you might be in between turns where you don't have access to that, and Tamamo can really come save your beans by being able to just deny an enemy their NP. It's just a nice point of interaction to have that, let's say an enemy removes all of your buffs, well, this gets around all of that because it's not a buff you give yourself, it's something you do to the enemy to prevent them from hitting you. So it can actually buy you a turn against some of these bosses that are just going to remove your buffs anyway. Plus, there's the whole niche that Tamamo has of pretty much trying to lower everybody's skill cooldowns and trying to spam her NP as often as possible to make sure your skills are always just pretty much spammable. And so when you consider that, and then this is going to be a bit more available than just 5 turns, it makes it a lot better. Now, her second skill is not like something you really want to focus on too much. It's just kind of good because it allows you to not really focus on Tamamo. And what I mean by that is that it just keeps her safe. It makes her a bit tanky. For 1 turn, she's going to have 60% defense. Then the following 2 turns, she's going to have 30% on that 5-turn cooldown. It just pretty much says you don't really got to worry about Tamamo. She'll be really thick, she'll be tanky, she's probably not going to get obliterated, and lets you focus more on your DPS and keeping them around. So that's kind of all you're worried about with skill 2. Just pop it as often as possible, make sure it's pretty much always up so your Tamamo just doesn't get obliterated. Then finally, there's her third skill, and this is something that I also really like, because the 50% arts buff is really nice for 3 turns, because it pretty much means that you're not losing any of your arts efficiency by replacing one Castoria with a Tamamo, right? Because you're still getting that big arts buff. But the thing that's really nice, and something that I talked about in the Pope Joan video, was that in an art setup, you're pretty much fighting a war of attrition, right? Because Castoria gives you no sustain. It's pretty much all just heavy defense, but every time you lose HP, you're never getting it back. There's no heals that Castoria provides, and unless your main DPS just has a heal built into their kit, you're using, I don't know, Saber Nero with her double heals, right? If you're not using someone like that, once you lose that HP, you're not getting it back. And so Tamamo giving you a 2500 heal, again on something that should be kind of spammable if you're playing the art setup correctly, it gives your party just so much more sustained. It's almost why Lady Avalon is really exciting for art setups, because she's effectively just Arts Merlin, right? In practice, that's all she is. And Merlin is one of the guys that just lets you sit there for like 90 turns, because his NP is so good for like infinite sustain, right? But Tamamo still does a very similar thing. While she doesn't do the max HP that Lady Avalon does, still just being able to give you big heals every couple of turns and another huge arts buff, it makes things really nice. But on top of that, because you're probably going to be just giving this to your DPS, her NP actually heals the entire party by at least 2,000. Again, not a huge heal, but it's nice because it gives you some sustainability. And again, you should be spamming this NP like every other turn, if not at the bare minimum every 2 turns. Maybe you're getting really unlucky, but still, if you remember like back in the day when you were doing like Tamamo and Waver setups, Waver only gives you 20%. It should be even easier to get to her NP nowadays because Castoria gives her 30% plus the NP gain buff, because her NP gain applies to everybody in the party. So it actually makes it easier for Tamamo to get to her NP. And then you can see right here, she's reducing the party skill cooldown by 1 and giving everybody at least 25% NP, which is why you also always want to put her at the very end of a chain. So let's say you have like Castoria and you have your DPS ready to go. You could put like Castoria in front if you want the extra offense, or Castoria in back if you want the extra hits of solemn defense, whatever. But just make sure Tamamo's in the back, because they're going to drain their NP and then she's going to give them an additional 25% so it's not wasted. All this to say is that Tamamo is still very, very strong. I don't know why people just kind of pretend that you can't use her anymore, or it's not like good to still use her, especially in more difficult content, because it's even more baffling, because a lot of people will be like, oh, I already have Waver, I'm going to pick up Tamamo from my like free 5-star ticket. And I'm like, well, if you're not going to use her, then why are you picking her up, right? Obviously, I think she's an incredible servant to get and a very, very strong servant in a lot of these setups, but you still gotta actually go through and use her. And hopefully this video kind of showed you why she's still really strong. Like, she provides a lot of damage to the party because of the NP damage buff. You're at bare minimum going to be able to triple buff whoever you're going to be using because of the attack buffs, the arts buffs, and the NP damage buff. Because let's be honest, Threat Against Humanity is not always going to be live, but at bare minimum is going to be giving you a lot of damage. She's pretty self-sufficient. She gives the art setup sustainability. And if you've ever been in one of those scenarios where you're like, oh man, if just my invincibility buff was up for, say, Castoria, I would just be able to live this turn and then win the next turn. But oh no, the skill is on cooldown. Well, you're not really going to have as much of those issues with Tamamo, because again, you should just be spamming her NP, getting a lot of NP, getting sustained back, and being able to just spam your skills all over the place. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. I will not hear any Tamamo slander. I still think she's really, really nice. But again, I'll just see what you guys have to say in the comments down below. Maybe I'm just capping real hard. Maybe I'm just not with the times. But every time I use Tamamo, I really like the feel of her in an art setup, right? She just makes the team flow really nice. Like, just being able to spam your NP a little bit more, being able to spam more skills, not just getting obliterated because I ran out of health. That's just all a really nice feeling. Like, she's like the oil for the cogs in the machine, right? It just runs more smoothly whenever you throw Tamamo in there. Also, shout out to that time in year 1 when if nobody pulled Tamamo, they would just like delete their account and stop playing. Like, she was the first like major targeted support to come out. So people would just kind of quit the game. Kind of ironic because Castoria and Scotty, the next like new age, really big support type servants, they kind of did the same thing, but Tamamo's like, I already did that first, right? People are already quitting the game because of me, so I just think that's really funny. So shout out to Tamamo for having a bunch of players quit the game. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late, guys.